As a nation, as a people, we tend to label each other's just because they don't think exactly like us. What can your label be? Christian nationalist, progressive, conservative? Really, does anyone really fit into the little cubbyhole that's being used? I don't think so. We're not 100% this, that, or the other. We're kind of middle of the road people. And, we bend to the right sometimes, and sometimes we bend to the left, but I don't think many of us are all the way to the left, to the right. I think we're down the middle. And before the followers of the way were widely known as Christians, they were given a more hostile and politically charged label. They were considered atheists. Most people in the Roman Empire considered a worshiper of one god, rather than the many gods of Rome, including the state of Caesar, to be tantamount to worshiping no god at all. And for this congregation, likely located somewhere in modern day Turkey, the question was, what do we do? Do we become a sect and separate out, living, who knows, in a cave or a compound, or do we live in and among society? And if we live in society, how exactly do we live? How do we treat each other in the process? And those decisions depend not so much on what we decide to do, but on what God has already done. We are now followers of the way, truth, and life, Jesus Christ. First Peter explains that we are a no people at first who become God's people. And according to Peter's sermon in Acts and his letter to the church, none of us was anything without Jesus. We were ransomed from a spiritual prison. The smartest business person, the highest ranking government official, the lowest homeless person. No one could claim any freedom or identity until we were reborn. And now we are God's people. And by living the way of Christ, we demonstrate to the world how they should live. And we are, in Professor Will Williman's language, showing the world who they are and the way they can be. But we are also showing each other the way we can be. And as we do, we find stability in the troubled and turbulent times in which we find ourselves living. That means we as a local church can't simply withdraw from the world, but instead we need to find stability in the way we live out the way. In our reading from First Peter, we find three metaphors, images, if you will, that describe the new kind of life we're living. First, it says we are a rock. Just as Jesus said to Peter, on this rock I will build my church. Now Peter writes to his church that the church is now part of the foundation and structure. By coming to Jesus, we have been changed into a living stone. And the second metaphor is the spiritual house. Not only are we a rock, but we are a household of faith. And because you have a foundation built on the rock and not on shifting sands of the age, we join together as a community or household of faith. And the third metaphor, a holy nation. As a household, we have been called to a new kind of citizenship. We have been neutralized by the King and certified royally. God himself has created a new people. Rock, house, nation. All of these have come together at the time when Peter remembered well. And in John 14, Jesus told them when he departed, this is part of his last discourse, that they would need to learn how to live his way together. He would be the destination that they're going to, as well as the route of life to follow. That's why he came in the first place, to show the way. Obviously, their first few experiments didn't go well at all. This is the situation that the early followers of the way discovered when they first trying to work together as in Acts 6. And if you listen to the reading, what do you think happened? Well, you guessed it. An argument broke out. They were trying to replicate the life they had before Christ with the same old systems, the same old principles, the same old practices. It calls for change. Their language, cultures, and ethnicities threatened to divide them over food insecurity, inequities among the widows and the poor, and they gave preferential treatment to one group over another. And it's a good reminder that differences in the church often do not begin over verbs in a doctrinal statement. Not at all. They start with people being hungry, feelings being hurt, control issues, a host of small, seemingly insignificant, mundane things. And Peter practically reminds them that if you are a new living stone, you need to wear the clothes of conduct that fit your new lives. The old clothes no longer fit. They're ill-suited for a journey like this. And in 1 Peter, he writes that we need to get rid of malice, deceit, hypocrisy, slander, and envy. As Will Willimon writes, the faithful church is God's answer to the world's problems. The faithful church is God's answer to the world's problems. It's not that we are hostile to government or that government really is hostile to us. It's that we are hostile to each other. When we refuse to be reconciled with each other, we drive the world away instead of welcoming God's people to the great feast here at the table. When we work together, we become, a humble force of peace and love in a world that needs to be ransomed from captivity to, from forceful personalities. For example, in the 1930s, when Germany was divided and disunited, a young man rose to power with just 40% of the vote. The Weimar Republic was divided, and many people united around this forceful personality, his rhetoric and his music. They would sing "Germany, Germany above all" to the tune of Haydn's Australian hymn. Many Christian churches were resistant to this kind of rhetoric that put country above God, above the church. So they borrowed lyrics from a former slaveholder, John Newton, and sang a different tune together, exalting Jesus as Lord of all. And his words went something like this: glorious things of thee are spoken, Zion, city of God. He whose word can be broken formed thee for his own abode. On the rock of ages founded, what can shake thy sure repose? With salvation's walls surrounded, thou mayest smile at all thy foes. See the streams of living water springing from eternal love. Well supply thy sons and daughters, and all the fear of want remove. Who can faint while such a river ever flows their thirst to assuage? And grace, which like the Lord, the giver, never falls from age to age. When we come together as living stones, we witness to each other and to the world that a spiritual nation is following the way of Jesus. So which way are you going to go this week? And the church says, Amen.